I hear everyone complaining now about the wireless.
What's your name again?
My name?
My name is
Pish Rogues, hosted by Luke Conroy.
He rode down to Missy Mouse's door where he had been many times before.
This district derives its name from St. Dallan, its patron saint. It forms part of the barony of Tullyhunco or Tullahunho, the land of the McKiernans. For 7 centuries or more, these chiefs held sway in Kildallan and still maintain their title in local history. The anglicised name of McKiernan is Masterson. In bygone days, the chief market village which served the district was the now extinct village of Croghan. Many a skirmish was fought here between the McKiernans and the O'Rourkes and O'Reillys of Cavan. In the beginning of the 16th century, a daughter of the Prince of Breffni married a chieftain here in Kildallan, May O'Reilly and Brian McKiernan. A part of her diary was a book of Gaelic poems worth 6 milking cows. Probably this chieftain was the son of Galatia Og, whose name still survives in Kildallan in the localism, "You're as honest as Galatia." Have you ever heard that? Never. No, neither have I. In 1412, when the fortified town of Croghan was burned to the ground during a bitter feud between Maguires and a Maguire countryman and the McKiernans, Kildallan turned out to a man in support of the McKiernans. The big battle of Kildallan took place in the year 1470, when the war weapons were taken from the secret store at Carn. Kildallan swordsmen then publicly opposed the inauguration of the O'Rourkes at Croghan. Up to a century ago, fire signals were still used in Kildallan to convey hasty messages in case of death or danger. The most important fortresses were Kildallan, Croghan and Dunaweel. Dunaweel is famous for its ancient military reviews. The most important graveyard in the parish is the Relic, about 800 yards from the present church and graveyard. The headstones have fallen into decay, many of them now lying on the graves. At one time, people of all denominations were buried here. The relic is kept in decent form. The interesting feature in this relic is the true lover's knot. 2 green birch trees, which have entwined about 2 feet from the ground, an exact representation of a true lover's knot. The trees have grown to massive size. The large leafy branches cover most of the little relic. Various traditions are attached to this bush. The most general is that the 2 young people in the district fell in love. The parents of this girl objected to the match, so the lover went abroad for 9 years. During this period, the girl grew morose and her health started to decline. After a painful illness, she died, and the death bell tolled on the day that her lover returned. As he passed the relic, he entered in and was shocked to hear that the funeral was that of his betrothed. The news killed him. The pair were laid to rest side by side, and the birch trees were planted on each grave. So the hearts were interned in love, so in the process of time the trunks of the tree grew into each other. Collector, Miss A. Montgomery. Her occupation was a teacher and her address is from Core, County Cavan. Now I'll give you a little introduction before I start. Oh, what's wrong?
I'm finished.
Oh, don't worry about the chocolate. We're eating chocolate here. My guest today is a little different. This person is not only responsible for my earliest introduction to Irish folk things like folk cures and elements like the will-o'-wisp and fairies in my local area, but is also responsible for my very existence. It's my mam, Anna. I was lucky to be reared in direct view of where my mam grew up. Kildallan might not be the most nationally famous of areas in Ireland, but it's incredibly old with a unique and rich little folk history of its own, which has really bolstered my interest in those untold and unseen stories from local areas, which to me exemplify folklore and folk tradition and the importance of uplifting and retelling stories. Anna is a tireless member of the local community who has volunteered and fundraised for a variety of charities her whole life, generally aimed at aid and relief in countries that need it most after the likes of wars and environmental catastrophes and such like. In recent years, she's raised thousands for charities important to her, most recently Mary's Meals, which works to ensure children in countries around the world receive a meal and schooling throughout the year, or is it just a meal at school?
A meal at school.
That's perfect, because a lot of kids, it encourages them to go to school, yeah. Mam and I went to the same primary school, which is over a century old. And ironically, the location of the youngest members of the Kildallan area sit right beside Kildallan's oldest members. Kildallan graveyard, or on Relic, is right beside the school. And it dates back to at least the 6th century. But apparently it goes back even further because it was built around a ferry fort. I thought it'd be interesting for 2 generations of Kildallan natives to look back at stories to the area around them and to the stories of the school. And through in real Duke's fashion, have a chat about how a location has changed over the years. So Anna Conroy of Kildallan, welcome.
Thank you, Luke.
There you go. You're a natural. I'd say because I probably butchered it there. Yeah, Mary's Meal. It was set up by a Scottish guy, was it?
Yeah, it was set up because it was to do with the Bosnian War. They'd previously, as young teenagers, him and his sister and brother had visited a place called Medjugorje.
Yeah.
And got to know, were really welcomed into the place. And they just arrived and had no place to stay, and they were welcomed in. I think the priest at the time saw these youngsters at the back of the church and said, "Have you anywhere to stay?" And they said no. So the people were so welcoming then, they just took them in. The people were so kind to them. Then years later, when the Bosnian War broke out, they wanted to help.
Yeah.
To help the people. So they went with one load, but they stored all the stuff in the father's shed in Scotland. He lived in Dalmally in Scotland, and him and his brother went and did a run to Bosnia they borrowed a truck. And when they came back, the shed was full again. The Scottish people had been so generous.
Yeah.
And I don't know how many runs. I think there could have been another 15 runs, whatever. They kept going over and back to Bosnia with blankets and medicines and all of that. So then after that, his brother went back to work on his fish farm, but Magnus felt drawn to just help, and he ended up visiting Malawi. And that's where Mary's.
That's where the real school end of it. Yeah.
He met a young kid called Edward, and his mum was dying with AIDS, and there was 5 or 6 in the family, and she just said, "I need someone to who's going to mind my children? Can you take my children?" And Edward was the eldest. He was 14, and he was just sitting in a mud hut on the floor, and Magnus said to him, "Edward, what is your dream?" And he said, "I'd love to be able to go to school one day and have enough food to eat." And that's
it kind of tied it both together. And it's very smart. I didn't think of it that way, because it's smart insofar that there might be families who go, "Look, we don't have time to send the kids to school, they need to work or whatever." But then the incentive of, Jesus,
particularly girls, they get out of poverty because if they get an education, they can travel the world and become things that their parents would never have dreamt.
100. That story there at the start, obviously it goes through a lot of stuff that I wouldn't have been aware of with Kildallan. The wars and skirmishes, it kind of goes over my head. But then at the end, you'd be well aware of, ma'am, the Lover's Knot Tree in the Relic. When you were in Kildallan, it's mad to think it was still over there, wasn't it?
I'd heard the story of it, but actually you reading it there, it brought it more clear for me, because I'd heard about it, and I'd heard about it was 2 young people falling in love, but you kind of get mixed up when you're growing up with different stories, and sometimes you kind of muddle them up a bit.
And that you see all the time in this, it naturally happens. I don't know if it's me putting a creative spin on it, but apparently the Relic was always, it isn't so much anymore, but when it was first set up, in my reading of it, it's such an old graveyard. It was originally pre any Protestant or Catholic, because St. Dallan was around. But then after that, apparently both denominations would be buried there at one point in that old part.
And still are in the new one.
Really? Yeah, I didn't know that. But what was it? I remembered it, but it might be a creative spin, being that the 2 lovers could have been from opposing sides of the aisle, in terms of, which kind of adds to, I'm sure I've muddled it up with other sort of stories.
Not, yeah, because there was another story that we heard, and I probably mixed it up, where a girl and her beloved were supposed to go to England, I'm not sure if I have a feeling that maybe she was possibly pregnant. But anyway, the story we heard, I remember Dad telling the story that some guys were going past the Relic one night and he was in there digging a grave. Now, this is totally against the lovers now. It's obviously a different story.
No, but I love it though.
But that he was digging a grave and they were to go to England the next day. But the guys saw him digging this grave and they figured that what he was doing was he wasn't going to bring her at all.
Oh.
That he was going to kill her and bury her and take off on his own.
Really?
So they got her convinced, now, there may not be any truth to this story.
Yeah, but that's...
and when you hear things as a child...
They get...
they get all muddled up, with different stuff, and you're just not sure what part of it's true.
My experience of folklore through you has made me realise why I think a lot of them come up where I think I've mentioned, but like your mum, my granny would have mentioned Jenny Jangles to you. I think a lot of folk stories, not all of them, would have been invented.
Jenny Wiggins.
That's what her name was.
Jenny Wiggins, yeah.
I had the wrong... And what was Jenny Wiggins?
Jenny Wiggins was... She was a character that I think was created possibly by an old lady called Nellie who lived down the lane from us. And Jenny Wiggins was to scare you from going too far away from the house, or don't be looking in the river, you might fall in. So
Jenny Wiggins would get you.
Jenny Wiggins would get you, because I was a bit of a monkey for disappearing. and so I don't. Well, it was for the rest of them.
Did Jenny do much of a good job of keeping you away, or did it kind of excite things more? Or
it kind of really did, because I was a rambler. I tried to escape regularly. I used to just hide.
Yeah. Oh, really? And see if people would find you.
I hid once in the sitting room. Yeah, I think I was searching in a press that I shouldn't have been in. And my mum, I found... Oh, and that's probably why I stayed quiet, because Mum used to collect Green Shield stamps.
What were these doing?
And these were I don't know what the Green Shield stamps... Where did she get them? But you collected so many, and it was like vouchers for... she sent away for Christmas presents, possibly, for us.
Yeah.
Where there was a watch.
Yeah.
And I think it was for me. And I had found it then, so I stayed extra quiet. But seeing all of the neighbours were out looking for me. Mrs. Sheehan and Danny and Miss Josephine Freakill and Dermot, they were all out calling me. I think they'd been searching fields and the river and everything.
Because you'd be afraid, there was a search party, you're gone.
And then, in the end, I gave myself up, but I don't know how.
And then you almost had caused more bother. Maybe it was you found the watch, you were afraid you'd be...
Probably
in trouble.
In big trouble. I don't even think I ever told about the watch. I think they were just so,
Well, it's like that story,
that
not to bring it back to parables.
alive.
It's like when Jesus went missing in one of those parables. Wasn't Mary so happy?
That's true. She didn't really give out to him.
Yeah, I remember hearing that. I said, Jesus, that's a good sign. You were great with us in the countryside of grabbing I was only thinking of it recently, going out and getting frogs.
Yeah.
You're an expert and you taught me and David catching frogs.
How to do it, yes.
When did it start for you, the frog man? So essentially you had an enterprise, kind of, did you? Of these? Yes. What age would that have been and how did that start?
Well, the older ones would have been doing it. Jared was gone.
Yeah, how many was in your family? Sorry, yeah.
So I was there's 6 in it, and I was the second youngest. I remember Tony Moore going out collecting the frogs, and Teresa, my older sister, she was scared of all of them kind of things.
Oh, she wasn't.
And we used to dig worms as well.
Oh.
She tried digging and putting rubber gloves on, but
it's too gross to her.
She still couldn't do it, so I was a real tomboy and was ready for anything. I used to go fishing with them and all of that. So so I used to be brought along. I'd say I probably started frogging, as we call it. Probably 7 or 8, I'd imagine.
And you'd go out, what's the time?
Springtime?
You'd be allowed
to go out in the evenings. Evenings was the best time, and it was generally in the summer month. But it seemed to be a good time for them.
Yeah. What are the perfect conditions for finding a good frog?
Oh, a lovely damp a damp evening. And
Long grass, short grass.
Bit of fog.
Yeah.
Mostly in boggy ground.
Yeah.
Kind of like a lot of rushes and things, and then they'd get into the middle of the rushes, and you had to listen as well as
You did, yeah.
You give your foot a little, you take a step and you'd stop.
Yeah.
And another step and stop, and you listened for them hopping.
And would you collect them in a bucket? And so essentially,
We used to have a bag, a plastic bag. But he gave us a bag. He gave us a bag, and there was little holes in it so that it'd have the air. But there were rascals for climbing up the bags, even. Yes.
And who was this man? Like,
We called him the Frogman.
And how regular would he come?
I think it was once a fortnight.
Once a fortnight. Okay, so and you'd have to keep obviously hold of the frogs until.
Oh yeah, we had a barrel, a half barrel,
And make sure
and
they
you could
can't
only
get
put so
out.
much water in it, and then you had to put little pieces of timber on so that they couldn't be swimming all the time.
That's what I was going to say. They have to be
they'd
alive
sit-
so the
yeah,
gentleman could.
So they'd sit up on the pieces of timber, and like once you'd go to the barrel, you go and check your frogs. They'd all scarper off the timber and go swimming in underneath.
yeah.
So here's these horrible people.
Yeah, the frogman's coming. And did you ever find what he used? Obviously,
Well, you see,
classroom experiment, or maybe even the French market where they.
we thought, in the beginning, we thought that they were eating them and that they were going to France. But then that was a more romantic idea. Yeah. I think that they were going to be on somebody's table in France. But then we heard, as we got older, I think it was Dad said it to us, they're going to a lab in some of the colleges for dissecting.
They must need some amount of frogs, and they'd go into
That's
the cabin.
very weird, yeah, because sometimes we could easily have 100 frogs, and we got paid. We'd be off to Sheehan's for ice lollies or what you call those, where you put the ice cream sliders, is it?
Oh, you made them for floats. And would you ever get the bus? Was that later or?
No, we didn't get the bus, and I don't really know why we didn't get the bus. We were kind of saying, I think it was because the bus was put on for people who were further amount of kilometres away.
That's the thing, yeah.
So we had to walk. We didn't have the choice of getting on a bus.
A part of it was madness that I was on a bus obviously I was a child, and the older you get, you realise how young you were, but we were so close.
But
I think it was like a minute long
when
bus
you
journey.
think about it, like the journey a 4.5 or a 5-year-old had to walk from Greenville all the way up to the school.
How long minutes would that be? And I think 20, 35 minute walk.
Oh, easily. And the way we did it,
Actually
sometimes
more.
going forwards and backwards and into hedges, picking things. And
You'd go through.
we used
fields.
to play. No, well, sometimes we did actually. We thought it was a shortcut, and we'd have to jump this drain, and
But a good bit of crack, I
it
suppose.
was great fun.
So what would a normal walk, on an exciting day, so would you pick the crab apples? Was that it for your...
Well,
or
yeah,
for the
generally
crack?
we left them for coming home, but we might pick them, or we might pick peas, cat's peas we call them.
Cat's peas.
So they're like just little tiny peas that grow in the hedge. I used to pick them for my friend Bridget. 'Cause
Yeah.
she loved them. She used to eat them, but I'd never eat them. Then we used to rescue worms. That was my job, always rescuing the worms.
Off the road, or how
yeah,
would you
because
rescue them?
they'd be crossing the roads. I don't know why.
Hairy mollies or worms?
Worms.
Yeah.
And sometimes they'd be cut. I'd say birds or things maybe had tried to eat them.
And then they'd...
So, yeah. But
It's funny, you had a complicated relationship with the worm. Sometimes you
Yeah.
were saving them, and sometimes
other
you were
times we were
sending
selling
them.
them to the...
I suppose that's your product. You to get back in.
Any way to get money it seemed to be very important.
But yeah, would you be going to meet? What reason was it? Did you be going the wrong direction to school? And would you be meeting friends? Did you all go together, or was it just
maybe messing or fighting or pushing each other into the hedges and things like that? And then we'd invent this game, Farmers. We played it regularly. There'd be a farmer, so it was to make us faster. So every day, one person would be nominated to be the farmer, and you'd get a stick, and you had to beat everybody else on. The cows, you see, then would be trying to go up on the ditch and go back.
Oh.
So that's how you'd end up going back the way, because you were being a bad cow.
Yeah. That being said, then, before we get into any more whatever's, would you like to read your very sister, great writer, Teresa? She is a great I think her page is 42. She's on page 42.
Oh, there she is. She's open.
Well, that's very...
Ah.
That's what we call...
So want me to
fate.
read this? The day began with my mother calling me at 8 a.m. She helped me to get dressed and then handed me a large bowl of porridge to keep the hunger at bay on my first day at school. Breakfast over, it was time to put on my gabardine coat, which I hated, knowing that my 2 older brothers had outgrown it.
What's a gabardine?
Gabardine, it was a particular type of a tweedy kind of a material, a bit rough and...
Oh, yeah.
You know, a bit hairy.
Coarse, kind of,
yeah, but they'd never wear out. A kiss on the cheek and I was on my way with my 2 older brothers, Jared and Seamus, to my first day of school. We set off down the lane. Anyone who ever walked on a lane knows that there grows a patch of grass right down the middle. This was where my 2 brothers told me I should walk. Grand on a dry day, but on a wet morning I would have 2 soaked feet before I got as far as the road. The first stop was at Freehills, where we met up with Teresa, Pádraig and Dallan. Pádraig, unfortunately, is no longer with us.
Oh.
On we went up the hill, better known as Tubman's Hill. The next stop was Shorden's Gate, opposite the church, where we were joined by Thomas, Liam and Eugene. A few yards down the road we met up with Dermot, Joan, Aidan and Helen Corcoran. By now there was quite a gang of us.
I was going to say.
We continued on our way, and before we got to Carncross we met Benny O'Reilly, our local postman, affectionately known as Benny the Post. Some of the older members of the group inquired the time, and Benny obliged. I can still see him in his navy uniform as he took out his pocket watch. There was no post van in those days. On a wet day he would have a cape to cover himself, the letters and his bicycle. Benny is no longer with us, but he has passed on to his eternal reward.
People used to say that a lot more. In that book there's a few times he's passed on to his
eternal reward.
reward.
When we finally got to school, Master McAteer was there, stoking the fires in the 2 classrooms. Miss Baxter arrived shortly. In winter, we all brought bottles of tea, cocoa and milk. The master used to stand these bottles in front of the fire to warm them for lunchtime, loosening the cap first because if you didn't, the bottles would explode. It was all glass bottles then. Occasionally a bottle would explode, and much to the amusement of the children. I don't remember much about the work I did on my first day, but I can remember being very hungry at 12 o'clock, so I decided to have a snack. The desk I was sitting at opened at the top, so you could store your lunch and books inside. There I was munching away at my lunch when the teacher spotted me and told me I'd have to wait till lunchtime like everyone else. No. I began to cry, so she let me finish the slice of bread I was eating. When lunchtime did arrive, I hadn't much lunch left to eat, and I'd had a head start on the others. Lunch eaten, I was outside to play with my newfound friend, Teresa Freehill. We played catch, running around the school. Soon I was on the ground with both my knees cut. I had collided with 2 of the older boys, Philip Mahan and Thomas Shorten. Miss Baxter came to the rescue. She washed and cleaned my 2 knees and took me back into the classroom. I didn't go out to play for the rest of that day. In those days, you had to stay at school till 3 p.m, as there was no one to come and collect you at 2 p.m. My mother had younger members of the family to look after, and my father was busy working on the land. I remember being very tired after my long walk home. My mother always had the dinner waiting for me. All I wanted to do was to get to bed early, so as to be ready for the next exciting day at Kildallan National School.
Oh, she seemed to have a very nice first day.
She did. P.S. now here.
Yeah.
Me and my eyesight now. P.S. I think nowadays the children miss out on a lot of fun by travelling to school by bus, such as checking birds' nests to see if the chicks have hatched out yet. Yeah, I remember that. Eating cats' peas.
Whoa.
And crab apples. And meeting different characters on the way to school. I guess times have changed. It's not safe anymore to allow children to walk to school or anywhere else alone. What a pity.
What a pity indeed.
It is a pity. And what really is wrong with them walking to school? People are too
that's the thing.
fussy with their kids.
Yeah.
They let them play games on machines on the internet and talk to total and utter strangers. And
this is so true.
Let them walk up by the crab apple trees.
It's exactly. It's the Wild West on the internet.
With ginny wiggins or or some pervert online.
You're actually dead right.
When you
That's
think
you
about
need
it.
you need to create Jenny Wenginses so that you're dead right. Kids go on Roblox or Club Penguin or whatever
It's
the
like,
games are.
what's
and
the
go mad.
chances of you getting hit with a snowball with a stone in it?
That's it.
In
Yeah,
truth.
yeah. We were talking about that to give an idea of what size the school is. I'm sure I've talked about this before. I won't be shut up about it. It was really small. It was lovely. The way, as far as I remember, so there's 2 rooms. There was a prefab that was called the little room, and it was the big room. And in year day would have just been the big
Just
room.
the two, just that main building.
And you got
And
all
2
primary
classrooms.
and
It was
it
2
must have been
classrooms.
packed. Oh, it was. Oh,
It was
split in the
divided
middle.
down the middle, and there was a fire.
Don't worry.
So there was a chimney, and there was a fire in each room. So all the fires were back to back, if you know what I mean. It was all
Yeah.
the one chimney.
Okay. Well, yeah, me and Mam went to that school, but it was so small. I don't know if more kids maybe would have went to it when you were
It
in
seemed
school.
huge when you were young.
Yeah, it did. It
Seemed
did.
big. Yeah.
Now I always knew my class was particularly. I had one person in my class, so I was the. But that wasn't all. That wasn't odd. I suppose it
No,
has
but you
gotten
were in
older
a
when I
big
was older.
classroom, though.
That's.
You
I think
know,
that was
it
the
wasn't
benefit.
like you
of
were
it.
only 2 people in a room.
You had to get on with everyone.
You did,
and I
and-
assume it's the same when you were there. Yeah.
And then you see, you get to listen to the older kids being taught things.
The crab apples. Am I right in saying? Did anyone own those?
Nobody owned them.
Oh,
It
good.
was
I
just
wasn't
common.
that you were.
Just along the road. Yeah.
Rob-
They're still there. Man, and he parked his car up at the church in Call, and he had a ladder with him, a little ladder and bags, and I think some kind of prunery type things. And he, so it must be people making crab
it
apple
was
jelly.
that
I'd
bloody
say.
Nevin Maguire. He was
Could have
up-
been there. Yeah, applesauce and black lion from Kildallan.
Lovely bit of applesauce. Sorry, lovely soft accent on our Nevin. The milk, I'd say milk was gone by the time you were going to it, was it? Or people no, you used to do that as well, and you'd put it up on
Cocoa. Oh, and you put it up, yeah.
To be honest, that sounded really
It was
delicious.
actually lovely. Now, the milk then, you see, because we wouldn't have had pasteurised, homogenised milk. It would have been out of the can, you
Yeah.
know, because the milk the cows at home, and there'd be a skin on the top of it. I didn't like that.
Oh, you didn't? Yeah.
But I used to put my finger down and take out the skin, or if you give it a good shake. But it was lovely because you'd have a couple of spoons of sugar, of course, in the bottom of it, and you shake it up.
Speaking of which, you mentioned a character there, Josephine,
Josephine
who we know
Freegan.
well, and it was a great woman because she used to put she's
Lots
the
of sugar
she
in
was
the
only,
tea.
a lot. Well, maybe it was just she put in a lot of sugar for some reason. Maybe just to keep me sweet. I don't know what it was.
And you used to be hyper on it.
And where's Josephine's lovely story?
I remember Josephine telling us, and I'm not sure if it's going to be in this story, that they used to get turnips.
Turnips.
In a field. Yeah, they would take a turnip out of the farmer's
and
field.
and they liked they found
They'd
this
eat it
turnip.
raw.
I was going to say
Yeah.
that was you've heard of. Did you ever hear what I did with food dudes and parsnips? That I
Did
was
you throw
me.
them?
That was a good. Yeah, I was the only. I'd be known in that school as a good boy. I could eat two shoes within
Oh.
reason. I was the only one to let. Oh, miss, can I go to the bathroom during food
And
dudes?
what did you do?
And I
Flush
had
them?
mine, and I had me friends, me bolder friends, all in the pocket. I literally, once I got out and quiet, I ran out the door and I ran to the field and threw them into Corcoran's field.
Oh my
Then I ran back and I was like the Che Guevara of I was a secret
food
revolutionary, you know. Let me see. I think 34 was her page.
Right.
Well, you
right,
know what it
James.
is? It's a long time since I seen you, boy.
It is indeed. Well, now,
And by
James.
gee, there's many an old cow dead since.
It is indeed.
How are you getting on?
This season is free on all platforms every Tuesday. The Pish Rogues podcast is researched, recorded, and edited by one person. If you like the show, consider rating, reviewing, and telling a friend. You can now support the show directly on Patreon. Patrons can listen to all episodes right now. You also get access to an exclusive video piece and can help shape future episodes by suggesting folk stories for the show. Your support goes directly toward making Pish Rogues possible.
So if I went in the 70s, yeah, late 30s, 40s, I guess, yeah.
It's crazy to think, isn't it?
Yeah.
My earliest memory is of my first Holy Communion day. It was pouring rain. My mother drove me in the donkey and cart, the mode of transport at the time. I can recall all the donkeys lined up at the old hall just beside the church, where we discarded our coats and caps and put on our veils over our white dresses for our communion. A far cry today from the donkey and cart, but we were happy with what we had. Our school days were happy ones, for the most of it anyways. In the summer it was fun. We had good summers then. We went running to school in our bare feet. Sure, we thought it was great on the sandy roads. There was no tarmac then either. We used to write our names in the sand with our big toe until we hit it off a stone, and then it was a different story. In the winter, and they were frosty winters, sometimes with snow, we would always have a slide on the way to school, wherever there was a good covering of ice. We pulled each other along in tubs, kept us warm too. Of course, there were no cars or tractors to worry about back then. The horse and the donkey did all the work then. The fires in the 2 classrooms were kept going with turf drawn to the school by each pupil's parent with the donkey and cart. If the turf ran out, as sometimes it did, then the children would arrive at the school with some turf under their arms. That went on until the new load came. In the very cold weather, the children were brought up around the fires in groups to warm themselves. All the bottles of tea stood around the fire too. Our lunch then was a few slices of homemade soda bread and a bit of butter. Now and again we got red jam on it, which was a bonus. In the summer, instead of tea, we brought bottles of milk. To make sure it did not go sour by lunchtime, we stood the bottles in the stream across the road. We had many changes of teacher during my school years. They were all good. Some were strict and some were not so. We learned a lot at National School in those days. We learned sewing, knitting, crocheting, embroidery, plus all the other subjects. Did you do that, anything like knitting or...? No.
We did a bit of knitting, yeah. Not as extensive as that now.
That's insane, though. Yeah, I suppose.
But
practical.
isn't it a very good practical thing to do for kids? Yeah.
One master always had a snowball fight with the bigger boys when there was snow. That's fun. Another master played football during each lunchtime, which the boys loved. We did some strange things at school then, like going into the field of potatoes and turnips just down the road from the school. We'd pull the young turnips up and wipe the clay off them with the grass. We'd wash them in the stream and peel them with our teeth. We ate what we could of them before lunchtime was up. The remainder was hidden in the hedge to be eaten on the way home from school. There you go. It's fun, isn't it, these people? Like, I would have known Josephine, God love her, you know, quite an older woman. And it's really nice to imagine someone...
Her
that
washing
age.
a turnip and then scoffing it.
Scoffing it, yeah.
Peeling it. You can just see her peeling it and spitting out.
It's tough stuff to turn up. Yeah. Looking back, I suppose it was a form of stealing, but that never really entered our heads. They were sweet and juicy, and we were hungry.
Sweet and juicy turnips.
Back then, I bet I wonder, that's the thing.
They probably were, you see, because...
Maybe the young one, the fact a young turnip,
the
maybe.
baby ones were.
A nice treat on our way home from school in autumn was a neighbour's orchard with a pear tree. It was always laden down with lovely soft pears. Sometimes the fruit would have fallen off the tree, but if not, one of the taller boys gave the branch a little shake and the pears would come tumbling down. Each of us put a few in our school bag or our pocket if we had one. Then we would continue on our journey home. We had one exciting morning when the very first tractor we had ever set eyes on was in Ray's field getting ready to plough. Prior to that, all the ploughing was done by horses, and that's all we'd seen.
Wow.
So you can imagine the excitement when we saw this thing sitting in the field with a man putting big irons onto the wheels. We just had to see it working, and time slipped by. Almost 25 children from the same road were missing from school when the roll was called. The master, Mr. McGlynn, thought this was a bit odd, so up he got on his bicycle and came down looking for us. By this time we had left the field, having seen this queer thing turning up the sod. He met us halfway between the field and the school. Looking back now, it must have been rather funny to see all of us running in front of the master and him on his bike. We got a good scolding afterwards too. We talked about how this thing worked for days and weeks after. Some things just stick in your mind from those early years, like the way my father warmed our boots and clogs. He made the clogs himself for us. Before we put them on in the cold mornings, he got a piece of red coal from the fire with the tongs and broke it into small pieces. He put the pieces of coal into our boots and clogs, shook them up and down, and threw them back on the fire again. I can tell you, we put our feet into nice warm boots and they'd stay warm all day.
Wow.
There was no central heating then. In those days, you didn't leave school until you were 14 years old, at least. The day I left school was a sad day for me. I cried the whole way home. There was no mention of secondary school back then. We all sat our primary cert in 6th class. And most of us passed it. That was a big day for us. Of course, every child walked to school then, and we had a great fun and laughter together. On the way home, we ate everything that was edible in the hedges. We looked for birds' nests each morning during the springtime. The excitement of who found the most birds' nests and what type of bird that they belonged to was wonderful. None were touched, of course, but we kept a close eye on them until the little chicks came out. Gathering chestnuts and blackberries in the autumn after school was great fun. We went off with our buckets and cans through the fields, picking the blackberries, which we sold to the egg man. There's the egg man and the frog man and everyone else. This man came around in his van collecting the eggs each week. The money raised from picking blackberries was pocket money for ourselves. Yeah. Did that happen for you too?
Yeah, we did the blackberries, yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. Used to come with a big lorry and massive barrels on it.
Serious?
That'd been all around the country.
And were the blackberries just in the hedgerows?
Yeah.
And now to think...
And there's still loads of them, sure.
Yeah, and people just let them rot on the vine. And
not everybody.
No,
Sometimes
someone, and then they sell the jam for Mary's Meals. Who could that be? The children today have a very different lifestyle. They have more comforts, with no walking to school. Maybe they miss out on the things of nature in the world around them. We all got the odd slap on the hand when we deserved it. But it never did us any harm. This is the old school, innit? That's such funny. I have to say I enjoyed every day I spent at school. The children who are in my class are still good friends of mine after all those years.
Wow.
When I found that, you can kind of see it very vividly. It's amazing. She would have been an older woman at that stage, and how vividly she remembers.
Oh, yeah.
I thought the coal in the shoes.
That was amazing. And wouldn't you think that the shoes would go on fire?
That's what I was saying as well. Maybe the leather is very...
Well, I
don't
suppose
know.
if he made them himself. Well, clogs would have been made out of timber, of course, the bottom part. And then the top would have been just a bit of leather.
Would you look in the birds' nests and eggs and stuff?
Yes. Do you know Granny's Lane?
Yeah.
Well, when you be going down the lane, along where the bluebells and all them bloom, there was always thrushes. I think it was thrushes where, and it was amazing. And now, we didn't ever take the birds out of the nest or that, but we were bold sometimes because the mother would be away getting things, and we'd try and find something. And if you hung it over the little scaldies, as we call them,
scaldies,
would have their mouths open like waiting for the worm to be dropped in. Yeah,
but otherwise, if they smell a human on it, they might just abandon
them. They might
them
reject.
or
Yeah. Get off a body's back. I remember saying once to Joseph Friel, because sometimes people would hitch a ride on someone else's back, even though Joseph would have been older than me.
Yeah.
So I must have said to him at some stage, will you ever get off a body's back? And of course, I think even to this day, he'd probably still say it to me. And that was from Mammy. And he called Mammy Mrs. Buckya. Because Mom wouldn't curse. But she said, well, buck you anyway, Joseph, or, whatever. That was her way.
Something about hearing, and you'd hear her buck out of her book.
Yeah.
It kind of reminded me of as if she was kind of, she had spent too long with the hens.
I think she meant the F-book, but anyway. You were on about Teresa and her first day, and I have very little memories of my first day. But I remember going home and the master carried me on his shoulders down the hill. He lived at the bottom of the house where John Riley lives, where you got the drumming lessons. That house. And they lived there at the time.
Yeah.
And he carried me down the hill. So shortly after the end of World War II, I was appointed principal of Kildallan National School, a small two-teacher rural school in North County Cavan. Before leaving my home in Fanad, County Donegal, I did some research into the place I was going to and found out a few facts about it. First of all, I learned that it derived its name from St. Dallan, a noted scholar and poet who was a contemporary and great friend of St. Columkill. Secondly, I have to tell you a story about this after.
Please.
Secondly, the parents of the famous poet Edgar Allan Poe. Lived there at one time. The driver of the old school battered hackney car who drove me from Clonus railway station to my destination, on hearing where I was going, smilingly remarked, "Oh yes, Kildallan Brown Reds." I asked him if that was the name of the local football team. He promptly replied that it was not, but that of a famous breed of gamecocks which were reared in the area.
Mad.
This must be an interesting place I'm going to, with its saints, poets and its champion gamecocks, I said to myself. Kildallan National School, 1900. That inscription caught my eye as I approached the little drab grey slate roof building within a small yard, supposedly a playground, surrounded by a crumbling stone wall. On that first Monday morning, I felt rather disillusioned and disappointed. I'll stick it for a year, I thought to myself, and then seek my fortune in the city. However, as fate decreed, I stayed there for 25 years, and I must say they were the happiest years of my life. More about that anon. Kildallan National School was originally a one-teacher school, and it replaced an old thatch building about the year 1918. Turf from the local bogs was the fuel which was used for heating the classroom in winter. This was supplied by the children's parents and was brought to school in horse cart or donkey cart loads. A few of the bigger boys carried in the sods of turf and stacked them in a little compartment at the far end of the hallway. Needless to say, there were always plenty of volunteers for this job, as it was a diversion from the tedium of the classroom.
Wow.
There was no electricity or piped water supply in the area at that time, and the school toilet facilities were really primitive. Like most schools in rural Ireland at the time, Kildallan National School had no employed caretaker. Usually, two of the senior girls remained after 3 o'clock to sweep the floors and help myself and the assistant teacher to clean up the place. Nearly all the children were of agricultural stock. Farms were
Yeah,
Farms were of average size, and mixed farming was carried on, with dairying predominating. In fact, in those days, farms were not measured in acreage, but according to the number of cows they could accommodate and feed.
mad.
Thus, farmers were referred to us having a 3-cow place, and so on. There may not have been much snobbery or class distinction at that time, yet the daughter of a farmer who had 6 cows place would consider it beneath her dignity to marry a man who owned only a 2 or a 3-cow place.
Wow.
Milking the cows were done by hand, and the milking was carried in large cans to the local creamery in Ardlower, I would imagine it says. In Ardlower by horse or donkey drawn cart. My first winter in Kildallan School passed leisurely and quietly, with the children responding enthusiastically to instruction. Spring came, and afterwards the most beautiful summer. The hawthorn hedges surrounding the little fields burst out in profusions of white blossoms. The scent of meadowsweet and new mown hay filled the air, and Kildallan became a land of cuckoos, corncrakes, skylarks and cooing doves. I really fell in love with the place, and also with a very nice local girl, Josephine, the youngest of a family of 12. All that happened nearly 50 years ago, and now Josephine and I, after rearing 11, are living happily together in the city, where I spent the latter part of my teaching career. We paid a visit to Kildallan recently. There is now a fine, modern, well-equipped school there, and the pupils all wear smart, neat uniforms. Only the children near at hand walk to school. The rest are transported there by car, by special school bus. Time has surely marched on, yet is not without a feeling of nostalgia that I look back to the simple, free and easy days of the 1940s when I first came to Kildallan.
Wow.
He brought up about St. Allan and Colmcille being good friends.
Yeah.
Just this year, we were invited down to Inishkeel.
Yeah. That was an island.
By a parish. Well, we hadn't realised that St. Allan was buried down in Donegal, but he was down visiting his good friend. The monastery was attacked by pirates and they were killed, and both of them were buried on Inishkeel, so that's how St. Allan. So we were invited down there.
Dallan Forgal, I have an old story here from Margaret Maguire, is here.
Oh.
This school is situated in the parish of Kildallan, which takes its name from St. Dallan Forgal, who was a cousin of St. Mogue. St. Dallan, which is the name of another school in the area, funnily. St. Dallan was a son of Culla, son of Éire, and was therefore St. Moog's first cousin. He was at first called Éachid. He was a great student and wrote many books. He was a missionary scholar and a poet. Amongst other poems, he wrote a panegyric on St. Columkill, the Aura Columkill. St. Dallan defended the Christian bards at the Synod of Drumcate in 597 in the 6th century. He asked permission to read an elegy at the synod, but St. Columkill refused, saying that no man should be praised during his life. After his death, however, an angel appeared to St. Dallan and informed him. He immediately set about to publish the elegy, and at the same time his sight was recovered. His missionary labours extended to Donegal, Down, Meath and Westmeath. He died a martyr, murdered by pirates around the year 598 in
So
Enniskeil,
maybe he was
County
down visiting
Donegal.
Columkill's grave.
Perhaps that could have been, or even...
Or
you-
maybe he was a friend. No, it was
Yeah.
St. Connell's Church. We were invited down by them. And we walked. It was fabulous. We walked across. There's only a certain time that you
can get there.
walk out to, yeah, because it's like a double beach type thing. I'm probably describing it wrong. But when the tides go out, there's like a pathway. You know, the beach is free and you can get out to Enniskeil Island. And you only have maybe maximum of 2 hours or so. And the sea starts coming back in. And people have actually got stuck out there.
Serious, the
Dr.
whole...
and his wife went down. They have a friend. They went down and stayed down there, and they went out and they spent too long. And was saying that she was walking and the water was up to her knickers.
Serious?
Yeah.
And she had...
got
Damn.
trapped. Yeah.
Damn.
Yeah.
Where do we get... His feast is celebrated on the 29th of January. The site of St. Dallan's Church is in the townland of Kildallan and is marked by a cemetery. The cemetery is surrounded by a fort in the middle of which grows a birch tree so large that the branches almost cover the whole graveyard. In this graveyard, the saintly Father Brian McGurran was buried. Part of the above account I took about the history of the Diocese of Kilmore and as regards the graveyard. When I was a child of Kildallan School, I saw people coming from long distances to take the clay from Father Brian's grave. That collector comes from Margaret Maguire, location Killygorman, County Cavan, and the teacher was Ban Nigujar there. I probably said her name wrong. So you'd be aware of that, would you, that people would take...
I heard Tony on about that, yes.
People
That there
take
was
the clay
a very
from-
holy priest and it cures and people. Yeah, but I've never seen anybody taking any clay from it.
It might have been maybe
They were
an
doing
older
the same to
tradition.
Canon Ternan. That's why they put that block of marble on.
Around 50 years ago, a man named Jerry Leddy lived in Garton Address in a house now occupied by Bob Murdy. He died. The funeral went to the Abbey. On the day of his funeral, the water was low, and the coffin had to be carried some distance. Instead of being brought in the cot, the mourners had to land at the mouth of the Casses Lake, and the water was too low to float the cot any nearer. They had just made a stand when a summer crescent burst upon them. They had to leave down the coffin and run for shelter to a hedge. I'm not sure what that means, a summer crescent.
It must be a bad rain.
Yeah. In the course of 4 minutes, a squealing and pattering caused them to look sharply around them. They were horrified to see the lid of the coffin dragged open, and it surrounded by a batch of pigs, who had the sheet which covered the corpse tore into ribbons. The body itself would have been devoured had the men not run for their life to prevent it.
Oh my goodness.
These pigs were allowed to run wild almost. They had to subsist on dead fish and washed out to the shore grass, weeds, etc.
And dead
They
bodies.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, of whoever came by. They could run almost like racehorses, and when hungry, they resembled wild animals. This is a true story. The person who told this story helped to wrap up the corpse again in the remains of the sheet and bring it to the chapel. There you go, collector Mrs. A. Montgomery. She's from Corr, County Cavan.
And when you say cot,
I don't know why they have cot. I assume they
instead
mean
of coffin,
a big flat board. Martin has that. That's good. He's our producer. But yeah, just a strange one.
never ever heard that story now.
Really, yeah.
No, I didn't, but...
There was one, I want to see if there's any. We're very close to finishing. There was one that I just wanted to... the inspector's notes, I just wanted to... This is from
That
the
lady.
Kildallan book.
Yeah.
In the early years, the inspector was driven to Kildallan National School in a horse-drawn carriage. The teacher would be in fear and trembling. The inspector stayed in the school for the whole day. A 4-line whip was imposed on all the pupils to be present for the inspector. Does that mean the whipping was the 4 lines of whipping if they didn't show up? Someone remembers a pupil who had scarlet fever being expected in the school for the inspector's visit. Her mattress was put on a horse and cart, and she was brought to the school anyway.
Oh my God.
The inspector was... The writing in that book, it seems that the people lived in fear of the inspector coming...
Yeah, with the kicker.
That's the kicker I was fearing.
yeah.
The teacher was more afraid than... And I suppose the teacher would inflict their fear onto the students to make sure everyone behaved.
Yeah, true. When you think about it, wasn't it so silly? Like,
It sounds... I'm sure they could be cruel as well. It sounds from the description, you have the nice teacher who had you on the shoulders and Teresa's one allowed her to eat her bread and stuff.
Yeah.
I always thought, and obviously some could, and maybe it was more in secondary school, I thought that teachers would be awful cruel back in the day.
Well, they could be too.
Yeah, but they were, I suppose...
Well, I mean...
Cruel and kind, I suppose, yeah.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you, after McAteer that carried me down the hill, the next guy that came along was very good with the rulers.
Yeah, that's the thing.
Very good. With 5 or 6 rulers. Sellotaped together.
Sellotape together, Jesus.
From the hands.
During the famine years of 46 and 47, when people were dying from hunger, porridge was being made in the huge boiler at Tubbermurra and given to people who had little or nothing to support them. Over in Ardloher lived a man who was in need of the free food. By way of getting it, he gave up all his land into the care of a neighbour, Charles Lyons, until times improved. After some time, Murphy prepared to till his land, but Lyons prevented him. Murphy begged Lyons give back his land, but was refused many times. At these times, there was a regiment of the Molly Maguires at Ballinamore. One came to on Murphy's invitation. He came across the bogs opposite Kildallan National School. A number of men who were cutting turf cheered and mocked him. He walked up to them and demanded to know which man in the crowd would then cheer. No man answered, and the soldier went on his way. When he came to Ardloher, Charles Lyon was nowhere to be found, and the soldier went home without seeing him. Lyons, knowing of the intended visitor, hid in a sallow tree by the river. The Molly Maguires never returned because a friend of Lyons's who lived near Ballinamore had some influence with the captain. Murphy asked for his land one last time and was once again refused. And finally he said, well, dead or alive, I will have my revenge. Murphy ended his life as a hero to a large landowner near Drumshambo. After Murphy's death, Charles Lyons' son, Paddy, or Pora as he was called, interesting name, went with his wife and family to live in the ill-gotten house. An hour's happiness they never enjoyed inside its walls. Each night after he and his wife had retired to a bed, a great weight would come upon him, and it rolled from his head to his feet and back down again. And so that would happen until after 2 a.m. Then it stayed on his feet till daylight. This terrible thing went through the same drill every night over him. His wife could see nor feel nothing. At last he couldn't tolerate it any longer, and he used to bring a hook to bed and sit in his bed until morning waiting to defend himself from it, but he could not. After some time it was decided to move the house to a place 40 yards away from its original foundations. A man named Owen O'Hara took the contract of tossing the house. O'Hara was known to tell afterwards of how the lorry he was using was pulled from his hand and thrown down the field, but he could see nobody. When the new house was finished, Lyons went to live in it, but found it very little better than the old house had been. Once, in hope to banish the ghost entirely, he brought a priest to the scene. He began to pray in the room where the ghost was. The priest continued until he had brought the ghost as far as the room door. He fastened himself in the door jamb and remained there until somebody removed the priest's hat, which was hanging on the wall near the door. Before he proceeded any further, the priest told any man present who wished to see the ghost to leave his hand on him, but none were brave enough. The ghost was forced outside, and the priest said he won't come back in a hurry. But he came back indeed and is there still today. In this course of time, Lyons and his family had to retreat to Scotland. He returned after many years with a married daughter and an immense fortune. But the ghost came every night as he had done before, although not so bad. His wealth vanished in these few years. His fine house fell into ruins, And at the time of his death, the stars were peeping through the roof. When Lyons died, the corpse was kept for 2 days and 2 nights. It was late on the evening of the 3rd day when the coffin arrived. The corpse was placed in the coffin and a funeral proceeded up the hill to the road. But before they'd gotten 20 yards, terrible rain began to pour down. The funeral returned to the house, and as the rain continued, it was agreed upon to leave the corpse in that house overnight. The people who were present went home around 10 o'clock because they did not want to spend a stormy night in such a cabin as this. No person remained in the house, only Pora Lyons, son-in-law, and his 2 daughters. The 2 women, they fell asleep, and while they were sleeping, terrible hammering and knocking on the coffin was heard by the man who stayed awake. He did his best to awaken the sleeping women, but he failed. Lyons was interred the next day. This land brought great ill luck to anyone who has ever interfered with it. Some of the Lyons' children died suddenly out in the fields working. One of his daughters, Miss McHugh, came to live in the house and died soon after. The night after his burial, her son Jack and a cousin of his name, Michael Darcy, went to sleep in the house. Darcy had to flee, but McHugh said he would not leave that night. But in a few minutes later, he did retreat. The last owner of this land was a man named James Dolan. Damn, this is he had every misfortune imaginable happen to him and died while attending to his cattle.
Oh no.
And collector Kate
Why
Dolan.
would anyone want to live there?
Yeah, informant Pat Owen McLaughlin, age 76, from Unshina, County Cavan.
Funnily, what you said there about times being hard and people in the famine not having anything to eat. Old Jim in the lane had said to somebody here that those old gates at the Relic, the old upper gates, the original gates, the people gathered there in the time of the famine and were fed.
Oh wow!
People who had nothing, that it happened in Kildallan, that people were.
It seems to be. I heard a rumor. There's one about the Relic. Yeah, I didn't get to read it.
There's a lot of similar stories, you see.
That's it. The Relic, it says. I don't know if it's true. It's from a different. The Relic is an old graveyard in northwest Cavan, less than a quarter mile from the village of Tubber. Is that the same Relic? Would you say?
Probably nearly is. Yeah.
But it says this and another graveyard in County Mayo are believed to be as old as the time of St. Patrick and some of the oldest known burial grounds in all of Ireland.
It wouldn't surprise me.
The Relic has resting beneath its sods the local victims of nearly every Irish struggle. During the 98 rebellion, a party of mounted yeomen known as the Black Horse came from Northern Ireland and took up a portion of Carrot Hill. On Carrickburn Hill opposite them was a party of pikemen. The pikemen, having no means of defending themselves except their pikes, were easy prey to the machine guns of these men. The pikemen were killed in numbers, and the corpses were laid to rest in the Relic, and the remainder were interred on the rock adjoining.
You wonder why it's so high there, the Relic.
It's really
is it
high
like
up.
Layers of different
Grave sites and soil
or whatever, you know.
Because it is very high up. Part of me wondered when he mentioned how many people were buried there. It's such a small.
Well, it could have been a man's
plot.
grave.
Yeah, and people are just.
Sure, like look what they're doing now in different parts where there's trouble.
In the likes
They
of
just
Gaza,
kinda
etc.
mound them
Yeah.
up. There's no place for them.
It's surprised to me you can dig down and like there's more modern looking graves even in where the Relic is.
Well, I mean, actually, yeah. My grandparents' grave is has the luxury of being one of the ones near the centre, and it's like a full grave. There's an awful lot of the rest of them, and there
Keeled
was a
over and
surround put on
stones
it. But
and, yeah.
I mean, that's probably going out and down on top of other graves, if you know what I mean. Because like there's bits of stones and everything all through that Relic, and people had money then to.
I wouldn't be
put
surprised.
up headstones. So people carried in a stone, I'd say, in memory. Probably that was where they sat or prayed for their loved one that they'd, lost. That is a very old burial ground up there for death.
It's one of the few. I did see that on thing. And I kind of mentioned at the beginning. Apparently, it's one of the few cases where, people be afraid of fairy forts now.
Yeah.
Because it was the time of Dallin and them. Yeah. I think that was built on the site of a ring fort originally and there's not many trees around it.
That's how Christianity kind of took off so well in Ireland, because instead of trying to drive out the pagan festivals, they just changed them. They said,
aligned with them.
We'll go with Old Hallows. We'll turn it, instead of Halloween, we have, this is where we remember our dead and the souls come back to life just for one night in the year and all of this crack.
And the same way they do with do you know that's why apparently we have Christmas and baby Jesus being born around Christmas time, is that obviously Vatican, Roman Catholic Church or whatever, the biggest pagan Roman festival was around Christmas time.
Yeah.
And they kind of, I think we have a better idea now of when the birth of Jesus might have been, but they were like, let's just push it back a few months so that we can, so that people could get used to, right, the new big celebration. Yeah. It's going to be on the same day as we had our old celebration.
Yeah. And plus, I think it was all kind of tied in as well with the darkness of winter and something to give the people a bit of brightness and hope. That it kind of, you know...
Because you brought the tree in as well. That was the idea you bring in.
And it was just kind of to keep you going through the winter and know that spring was coming. Yeah. And so Jesus came and it was kind of, you know...
This is just one thing I wanted to mention. So essentially there's a creamery. There's a creamery very close to us in Kildallan. I think your dad was one of the people, granddad was, who he canvassed for it, kind of?
Oh, yeah.
Or more. You probably know better, of course.
I'd say he probably had... I think the farmers kind of not had shares.
It was a co-op,
shares.
It was a cooperative.
Yeah.
And they wanted it because I think he has it here. I might as well read Billy's words on
it.
The decision to build Ardloher Branch Creamery was a wise one, as it was to serve the community in a very satisfactory manner. I started working there in the early 60s with the manager James McDermott. It was an era when milk arrived by various means of transport, such as bicycles, barrows of various kind, horse and cart, and the old tractor owned by the more progressive farmer. I'm mad to think a bicycle. I don't know how you'd get milk going on a bicycle. The donkey.
You see, they had wee carts behind. Martin, I remember Martin saying about his Auntie Kathleen used to have like a little trailery type thing behind her bicycle, and she'd have 2 or 3 cans in it. Yeah, that's some weight to pedal, like.
The donkey and cart was probably the most common mode of transport. However, the stubbornness of the animal would often lead to a conflict with the owner and provided many a sideshow for the onlookers.
Granddad's ribs were broken by
a donkey?
An awkward... I don't know, was it I think it was a pony or a horse. Yeah, threw him out of the trailer and his ribs were broken. Yeah.
The volume of milk varied from half a gallon to 20 gallons per supplier, the latter being rare enough. Hygiene then was not what it is nowadays. Apart from the odd few gallons of water accidentally, in quotation marks, entering the milk chain, did he mean, why accidentally? Did they pour it in or?
No, I'd say.
Thin it? No, it was alright. The odd creature, usually the family pet, would have met its doom in their search for a drink of a lovely can of milk
and
during the night. Milk was separated then, with the cream being ferried by horse and cart by the haulier. I just said I'd include that. I didn't think of poor cats. The cat that got the cream.
Yeah. I remember being sent out on a Sunday. You'd have a dessert. And I remember being sent out to the cans. I used to love the job. It was a skill job. You went out and you got the lid off, and it took ages to get it. But say if Mammy had the dessert might be a can of pears or fruit cocktail. Is all it'd be, but you'd have cream with it because there'd be no ice cream. Maybe ice cream was another luxury.
It was very much.
But you went out with a good big tablespoon, and it was the way you did it. You brought it across the surface of the can, and you collected the cream.
You told me about this. It's a fine art kind of, or at least you had to be delicate with it.
Yeah, because it won't whip if you get in the other stuff, you know. So you have to get the thick stuff off the top, and like it's only a very thin layer on the top.
I was taught by the same woman in primary school as your youngest sister, my auntie, which is crazy to think she stayed in the school that long. She seemed to like it that much, particularly when you read the start of her story, no more than James McIntyre, where you're like, where have I landed? If Ricky came from somewhere else. But essentially, this is my principal, Mary Maguire, and she was scary sometimes just because she was the old school, but she was actually a lovely woman. She was just as in, she was, her bark was worse than her bite in many ways.
I just couldn't imagine her being, anything but nice.
No, literally. But she was a lovely woman, and unfortunately, of course, she's
gone to her eternal reward.
But she was a lovely woman. And she always used to give medicine in quotation marks, which was just penny sweets that you'd, if you fell over, you'd almost want to throw yourself over to get them.
A penny sweet.
It was a beautiful October morning in 1980 as I set out, hardly able to drive, for Kildallan National School. I was a bit anxious. I didn't know what to expect. It was identical to the primary school I had attended years before in Tipperary. Having left behind a large, well-equipped school in Dublin's north side, it was a shock to the system to be landed in this rural setting. A very wise person who had travelled the same road as me gave me some very valuable advice. When you get to know the people in an area, you'll love it, he said. I couldn't see any logic in his words at the time. But now, 20 years on, the jigsaw of life has fallen into place and the meaning of his words are crystal clear. Today I'm glad that I weathered the storm and survived the blast in Kildallan. As principal, I was allocated the senior classes. The room was so small and the pupils were so big that I felt claustrophobic. The turf fires, the wooden floors and the heavy old desks were in keeping with my feelings. To me, it was a fine example of pathetic fallacy. The classroom regime mellowed a lot with the abolition of corporal punishment. On the one hand, it left the atmosphere far more relaxed and conducive to progress, but on the other hand, the class was much noisier. The new curriculum of the 70s created a continuous din in the classroom, alongside which work did flourish. Even though the school lacked facilities and resources in the past, the children were always dedicated and they were eager to learn. They showed great respect at all times, and this made life easy for me as teacher. Kildallan School lies within a close-knit rural community, with the results of that being that we shared in many of their joys and sorrows, all of which had a big influence on the people, both young and old, within the school and its areas. While learning and progressing are all integral parts of the school system, there is a social aspect to life here also. I embarked on my teaching career in Kildallan School knowing absolutely nobody. But I have gone on to know so many. My sincere thanks to them for their kindness and cooperation. Every cloud has a silver lining, people say, and it is because of these good people that there never was a cloud that the sun did not shine through. I thought that is lovely. I thought that was a really nice thing. Imagine someone coming unknown to an area.
When you think about it, she was just a young girl.
Is there anything other Mary's Meals? People can donate if they want to that.
Oh,
online.
You give Mary's Meals a little.
We have to do the plug.
Yeah.
And that's what everyone else, they plug their art and
I'm
stuff.
very
you know.
proud to say that Mary's Meals is now feeding 3 million.
3 million.
11,060 children every school day.
There you go. If you ever pass by Kildallan, guys, there is a fridge on the road full of jam jars.
Full jam jars.
Full jam jars. And you can definitely give what you want for that, or give to the, and that's the great thing. If you want to donate to it, and yes, it has Mary's Meals, I'll acknowledge, and there's a Christian element, but I think the best part of it, I'm not necessarily the most Christian fella in the world, but what's really nice about it, as Mam has put to me, and I think it's an amazing thing and a very simple step we can do, is it's €22 to feed a child for the whole year, which is an amazing, it's an amazing thing to be able to do.
11 cents, and when you walk on the road or you go past, whether it's city or country, and you see an empty can or a bottle, you pick that up. The way I look at it, and we spend our time here, we don't go around looking for them all the time, but I always pick it up.
You.
I'm never ashamed to pick up a dirty can or a bottle, and I say, there's a mug of porridge for some little Wayne, and it's Wayne. I say
there
Wayne because Mary's Meals don't discriminate between, they don't have to be Christian.
Oh, that's the big thing. It was started out of the best part of, which is a great thing of every faith, is charitable concern. But I think I'll cut this out if not, you were trying to get near Gaza, etc. But it was impossible.
They're in Lebanon, they're in Liberia, but it's not, I think the big thing is, so many people asked, are you feeding in Gaza? And there was food sitting outside of Gaza. Someone
offered you money once, and they were of whatever a faith inclination, which is fine, but they said, they wanted to make sure that their money only went to a Christian, and ye said,
and we said, don't forget about it.
Yeah, exactly.
Don't want your money if you've got an attitude like that.
That's a great way to think about it. Collecting, you could clean up local areas and make it clean, and then also
amazing.
There is money.
I mean, there's a pub. There's 2 pubs now giving us their returns.
Serious?
Yeah. There's a lady here in Kildallan, and she is a carer, and she has told the houses where she cares about our work, And they fill her the bags of their waddies and
Yeah.
whatever their waters and any minerals they use. And every now and again, this black bag comes across our gate. And an odd time there's a milk carton in it, which we know we can't get anything for, but you just put that in the
So if
bin.
you pass our house in Kildallan, throw a can in. Throw it over the wall.
I don't care if you start throwing cans at me or bottles. The plastic bottles are worth more, so even
Oh, really?
better.
All right. Would you like to read the poem that you wrote?
Oh,
In the
where
thing, and
is
we'll
it?
finish
Oh,
off
no,
with
it's
that.
a very childish poem. I'm not a poet like my son.
No, I did.
No,
yeah.
my son is a gifted poet. But like this is very
I'm
simple.
gifted in nothing.
This is very simple.
I didn't lick it off the stone.
So this was my little contribution to the
Centenary book.
I was involved, quite involved. So Memories of Kildallan School. Well, wasn't the title very predictable?
No,
So
don't
anyway,
be self-critical
So
now.
Kildallan School in 100 years has changed its shape but not its name. ABCs and 1, 2, 3s, copies, slates, games and canes, all so different but still the same. Children learn there, then and now. They grow up and make their parents proud. Frosty mornings face aglow. We pelted each other with balls of snow. Skating on ice was a dangerous game, but falling down was no great shame. Grazed knees and snotty noses, tears rolled down the angel faces. Troubles similar through the ages, teachers always to the rescue. Mums to those while mum's not there. Playground memories for me, while teachers drank their cups of tea. All that energy, so much fun, so many games played before one. On rainy days there wasn't much fun. We'd sit in the shelter and think, thank you, Mum, for if you were lucky she had packed you a bun. Summer would come as it did every year. The sun always meant holidays were near. We carried our desks outside one by one and promised we would get all our work done. Friendships formed and then some were lost. Disagreements, that's the cost. Teachers, pupils come and go, but memories remain.
Lovely stuff. Memories remain. There we go.
Good
Whoa.
memories.
Let's chat to you now. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Luke.
Bye-bye. Thank you, Anna. Way up Kildallan. Up the brown
Up
reds.
that brown red.
Music by Gareth Quinn Redmond. Photography by Ulan O'Muraku.